Welcome to Unbelievable Stories. Today's story is full of shocking twists and real drama. Subscribe and like to stay updated. Let's dive in. I was sitting quietly in a bar on a Monday afternoon, enjoying the calm atmosphere. This spot became my go-to about 4 years ago when I first stumbled upon it while taking a walk. I found it not long after moving here, away from Riverton, which used to be my home. Around that time, I ended up buying the local gas station and garage at a bargain price. The place had been up for sale for over a year, and the owner was eager to let it go. I saw the opportunity, made a low cash offer, and grabbed it, thinking it was the perfect chance for a fresh start, leaving my past behind. The first thing I had done was build a large retail store at the front of the property facing towards the gas pumps to supply the town after the only grocery store closed down for the evening at 8, and change the pumps to pay at the pump. To do that, I had to relocate the tanks. Now the pumps were seen from the store, which left lots of parking spaces for customers in the middle of our large lot. From 8 p.m. to 1 a.m., it became the store's busiest hours. The gas bar convenience store was now open 247. The garage, which was towards the back of the property, was open from 7 to 6 days a week. I would come in and work on Fridays on special projects. The bar was upset for a while when the retail parts started carrying the basics and alcohol. It was like most of these small-town operations, you would never get rich quick, but it provided a very good living and helped to add needed employment to the community. Each and every year we were able to save better than most. With no real employment outside of farming, most young people moved out as soon as they could. After a bit of restructuring of internal store merchandising thanks to a lady I had to hire, it had become a very successful business in a short time. It had repaid the money I had invested in as a shareholder's loan. We had to double the staff, it became that busy. On Tuesday and Wednesday nights, we sold a lot of junk food as those leaving the bar tried to sober up a bit before going home. On Fridays, we sold a lot of cold beer at a reasonable price. I was just sipping on a straight double shot of Jim Beam with a glass of iced water and a cut lemon on the side, having just finished up replacing a steering column in a timer's old truck. It was a family heirloom, and his pride and joy. It had taken me 6 months to find the damn part, and even then, I had to fabricate by hand some of the attachments for it. His family had driven the truck since the 50s, and he wasn't going to stop. I thought if he had his way, he'd be buried in it. Between 5 and 8, it was the best time to be here in the bar, for most of the regulars would be having supper. In a couple of hours, the place would fill up with the music crowd. When the band started playing, the farmhands would be bringing in the farmers' daughters for fun and after-work hours entertainment. In the 8.5 years I had been here, I had built a solid reputation and had quite a few friends. Most of the locals had a habit of watching out for each other, and would tip the person off when something out of the norm was going on. I only came in once a week to the bar, always on Mondays at the same time, to have my one and only before heading home. It was my downtime that I used to gather my thoughts in peace. I saw them walk in. I wished I hadn't, for they automatically ruined the end of a perfect day. I would still recognize them anywhere, anytime, or any place, and still wish I hadn't. The lady was my ex's twin sister, and the young man with her I had at one time called him my son. It brought back memories that I wish it didn't. It was a time period when I learned that you could not see evil when you were living with it. Since I had last seen him, he had grown, his overall looks had changed a lot. He was looking more like his biological father. It proved to me that with time, the truth would have come out no matter what. The question today was why they were looking for me now. They walked directly to the bartender to chat with him for a few. I saw her pull out a picture out of her purse and show it to him. The bartender said a few words to them, and I watched them turn and head back out the door. I was grateful for my long unkempt hair, full beard, and mustache, for they helped to give me a completely different appearance, especially since I had lost the extra weight I used to carry. No one noticed the text message I had sent out. All it said was they're back. Be home when I can. It was around 20 minutes later that the bartender came out from behind the bar. He walked over and sat down. What did they want, Paul? I asked. They are looking to get a message to you. They say they had heard a rumor that you were living here and they came to check it out, Paul replied. They are saying that a person named Sophia is dying of cancer and hasn't long to live. They are looking for you because she wants to make peace. I asked to see a picture of you, claiming that I did not recognize your name. Who are they and what do they want? I took my Camel Red 100 out, took out a cigarette, and ripped off the filter, sticking the smooth end in my mouth before lighting it. The lady is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my wife's son that she passed as being mine for years. Based on your years of summing people up, what do you think? I asked. Were they speaking the truth this time? Reading their body language, he replied, I would have to say that they are trying to be honest in part, but are definitely hiding the truth on something big. I nodded my head. My ex-wife and her sister had always been masters of deception, making things appear to be one way to your face while at the same time stabbing you in the back. He got up and went back behind the bar. My mind flowed back to nearly 8 years ago when I had left. That day, I had told them all I would not be back for 6 years. They had all laughed at me as if I was nothing but the fool. I guess to them I was. They learned the hard way that day, for it had been the last time they had seen or heard from me directly. They didn't believe that I was that serious or that hurt. They thought I was just pissed off because of the joke they had just pulled. Little did they know that I had learned a few weeks earlier that our youngest was my brother-in-law's son. It set me on a path of discovery that had led to this point. At that time, they did not know that I had been given proof by a family member who said she had seen me stabbed in the back once too often by Sophia and Clara, the evil twins, as she called them. In that old Grand Lattice eyes, they were black witches that practiced their art with pure evil. Earlier that week, before I had left, we had discovered a freshly acquired insurance policy on me for double indemnity for accidental death. If I died by accident, the payout would be $3.3 million. The Grand Dame had told me to run for my life. When I walked out of our house to my work truck, they had no clue that it was already loaded with everything I wanted out of the 12-year marriage. I drove down the driveway to the county road, turned left, and never looked back. By the time I stopped driving, I was 3 states away. I must admit that I was partly to blame, as I had knocked Sophia up when she was 18. I was 20 and just finishing high school. My family convinced me to do the right thing, and we got married that summer. In quick succession, the 2 other children had come along. They were still laughing at what they had done. They thought it had been hilarious. Sophia said to our daughters, "Your dad will be back when he's cooled down. He really needs to get a sense of humor." A couple of hours later, my wife saw the sheriff's department vehicle drive up to the front of the house. She went to the door to greet him as he walked from where he had parked. "Are you Mrs. Ryan?" he asked. When she said yes, he said, "Ma'am, you just been served." "With what?" she had asked in jest because she thought it was all a big joke. When she opened the legal envelope, they all learned the hard way for the first time just how much I knew. I had heard through the Grand Dame that my wife had been devastated to learn that I had ended our marriage without a second thought. My lawyer and I had even listed all of our assets and liabilities. The DNA report showed it all. The affair had lasted for a year. The divorce petition had times, dates, locations, and hotel receipts which showed the credit card that was being charged. The provider of the material even provided pictures of the couple in the act. During these events, Clara had been a participant because she babysat our children and theirs so they could consummate their relationship. Inside the legal envelope, by my request, he had put in a sealed letter. When she opened it up, Sophia, as sister, who was there, learned I was suing her husband for back child support, marital interference, and for public slander. That's when their laughter stopped. No one thought it was funny anymore. I was no longer the joke they thought I was. It was me who was having the last laugh. After all, their standing joke was that the only thing I was good for in their eyes was making money. Everything I did seemed to turn gold and provided cash flow, so Sophia and the kids were spoiled rotten and lacked for nothing. Sophia learned later that afternoon that I had sold our 3 businesses I had built from scratch and paid off all our debts. Even the 2 apartment buildings we owned were gone. I had sold them for a good profit. I had canceled all the credit cards and removed my name from all the bank accounts. I signed over my half of our home to her, and took half of what we were worth in cash. All that was left for her to do was agree to the divorce. In doing that, I had knocked down our cash flow from about $5,000 a month to 0. Sadly for Sophia's sister, she had to find out the hard way the cost of using me for their advantage. My lawyer took them for everything they had before they got divorced. Because of the damage I had done to them all, he had frozen their assets before they were even served. Once their divorce was done, they were both ruined. My lawyer called her back into his office when it was all done and reimbursed her with a quarter of what they had lost. "Why is he doing this?" she had asked. My lawyer said, it was never about the money with him. For him, it was and still is a matter of principle. In case you don't know, that's something you and your sister have proved you do not have. He figures by giving you this money, it gives you a chance to start over and hopes you will learn from your experience. Sophia had refused to sign off on the divorce until she talked to me in person, so we were still both in limbo, legally separated but not divorced. I had no need to talk to someone who had deliberately lied to me for years. She had to work for the first time in her life. For her, it was a new experience to learn that money seemed to disappear fast with none coming in. I had my lawyer forward anything of importance to a mailbox I rented from a Courier Express retail shop, and once a week, they would forward everything to my business address. I did it deliberately because I knew with the history of our lives together, they would never stop. The two sisters loved to play with human emotions and manipulate everyone involved in their lives. Knowing the two of them as I did, I knew that they would plot their revenge. It was not a matter of if but when. With their family, there was no such thing as being able to walk away. It would frustrate them to no end if they could not find me. The longer it took, the worse their payback would be. No one could be seen getting one over on them. Until now, I thought I had. With Clara showing up, I knew their game had not come to its end. I finished my drink and headed for home through the back door in case they were watching the front. I cut through the empty lot behind and walked around the block using the back lanes towards my pickup truck. I was just unlocking the door, getting ready to climb in when the man stepped forward and said, "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Ethan Brooks, no doubt about it." I turned and looked at him and said, "Just how would you know that?" "My name is Joe Edwards." "Your eldest daughter, Madeline, is my wife," he said. "That can be a blessing or a curse for you," I said. "If she behaves like her mother." "So why are you here, and what do you want?" "I came looking for you," he said. "Some things need to be settled from the past." "They would be if your mother-in-law," I said, "would just sign the divorce agreement." "What divorce agreement?" Daniel asked in surprise. I told him to get in his car and follow me. A few minutes later, outside the main drag of town, I turned right and drove about a mile, then did a left turn into the long driveway. I stopped by the farmhouse and led him into my home office. I pulled out my divorce file, turned on the printer, and told him to make copies of whatever he needed. Daniel did not need to know this was not where I lived, but I had built it for the grand dame, who he hoped would finally say she was ready to move from Riverton. Daniel was a nice-looking young man, perhaps about 28 years old, his hair professionally styled. He carried a self-assurance that came out quite naturally. He came across to me as an educated man. The question for me was he who he said he was, and was he part of Sophia and Clara's team? He used my Wi-Fi password and uploaded everything into his laptop. From my house computer, all important records were kept here, with a master copy of everything in a bank box. One of the things that interested him was the copy of the sheriff's department report that Sophia had to sign on the day that she got served. The only thing he got a print of was the letter from Sophia's lawyer to mine. It was that lawyer's letter to mine that did the most damage to what he had been told. It laid it all out in black and white. Sophia and her lawyer had agreed to the settlement of assets, but would not sign off on the divorce until I talked to her in person. The letter from her lawyer acknowledged the receipt of all the outstanding money by them. While he was doing all that, it gave me a chance to watch his facial expressions. It showed that he had no clue as to what he was learning. My documents, as they were laid out, were contradicting something that he had believed. "Do you think Madeline knows?" he said. "That's a question you will have to answer for yourself," I replied. "One question for you, though. Is Sophia actually dying of cancer or not?" "Who in the hell told you that?" Daniel asked. "Clara was in town today with Noah looking for me," I said. "That's what they told a bartender that I know. She is fine and is living common law with the man who was her lawyer back then. She is currently carrying his second child," Daniel said. "She was the one that asked me to find you so she could start the divorce. She claims it's so she can get remarried." He opened up his cell phone and called his wife. I could hear her in the background. He then turned on the speaker so I could hear both sides of the conversation. Madeline, did you know that your mother was lying about the divorce not having been started? Daniel asked. What are you talking about? Madeline said. You know our dad skipped town because he was going broke. Just after he left that day, us kids went out too, so we were not home when our mother found out. Mom told us later that it appeared that our deadbeat dad had walked out on all of us. Mom and Aunt Clara told us later that he had cleaned out what was left before he left town. If it hadn't been for our stepdad, we wouldn't have made it. I'm sending you a legal file. Get my sister to watch our baby, Daniel said, then get back to me as soon as possible after you have read it. As they talked a few more minutes, I got up and took 2 bottles of Bud out and opened them up. I placed one in front of him. Why didn't you tell my daughter you had found me? I asked. Madeline and I have been married for just about 3 years. She gave birth to our son 6 months ago. Rest assured, for now, I'm not going to tell anyone I found you, Daniel said. As far as anyone in the family knows, I'm working long hours investigating a case. With that, he opened up his wallet and showed me his badge. It showed that he was a police officer for the Riverton Police Department. I opened up my laptop and opened the webpage for my hometown. Clicking the link, it took me to the police department's webpage. It proved he was telling me straight. It was that fender bender that got reported a few months ago that gave me the lead to find you, Daniel explained. Madeline put in a missing persons report on you, which got forwarded to a watch for list. The insurance company informed me about the settlement in your favor. So why didn't you tell Madeline you found me? I asked again. In reviewing your detailed file, it became clear that something else might be going on, Daniel said. The first question I had to ask was what happened to the $260,000 cash Sophia was supposed to have received on top of the deed to the house. The second is why have all of them been lying about what really happened? Sounds like someone has been fed a bunch of lies just like I was, I said, as his cell phone rang. It's my wife. Well, throw the speaker feature on, Pete said, so please be quiet. Hi, dear, my daughter said. Where did you get all of this? Is it real? If it is, we all have been lied to for years. Noah has no clue about his true parentage, just as I didn't. My sister Lily is going to be shocked to see this. Mom rode hard for always standing up for our dad, so much so that they're no longer speaking. This paints a different story from the lies we have been told. By the looks of it, my mom and my aunt left my father no choice. The two of them had been playing with his life behind his back for years. What gets me is the fact that the divorce is not finalized because my mother won't sign off on it. This makes me wonder what is really going on. It's real. I got the information directly from your father's lawyer. Sadly, I had to go out of state to find it. It seems her husband kept duplicate copies of all of his records on his home computer, Daniel said. I'm sure glad he did. The files show that your mother got served the divorce petition the same day he left. I wrote out on a piece of paper, tell Madeline to talk to her great-aunt Margaret if she's still alive. Daniel nodded his head. Pete, it's now more important that we find my father, Madeline said. If only to get the divorce done for him. My dad deserves to be free of my mother and her scheming ways. What happened to the money she received? If she owned the house, why did she have to sell it? The more I review the facts before me, the more I am asking what in the F was going on, and why was she planning to sue him for desertion once she found him? Hey, I got an idea. Get my sister to watch our son a little longer. You go talk to Aunt Margaret and let her know what we have learned. Maybe it will force her to open up, Daniel said to you about what she knew. For now, this has to stay with us because it's beginning to look like there may be a strong case of fraud going on. The question that has to be asked is why your mother has been slandering your father for years. This is something I will have to talk to the district attorney about. $260,000 in cash seemed to have disappeared once it was out of your father's lawyer's hands. One final thought, don't even tell your sister for now. If the DA wants to investigate, it's better that no one knows anything. I got up from the table to get us a couple of refills to allow him some privacy until they had finished their chat. How come you want Madeline to speak to Aunt Margaret? Daniel asked. Margaret was the one that had gathered all the information on Sophia and Anthony's affair, I said. She may have never been married in her life, but she watched over the extended family like a mother hen as she raised her only daughter. Being a single mother changed her view on a lot of things. She believed that Clara and Sophia had conspired and set up the whole thing. Both Anthony and I were being used, but what their ultimate goal was is anyone's guess. If that is true, the question is why, Daniel said. Aunt Margaret's granddaughter, Emily, has wanted her to move in with her for years. She keeps saying not until the truth comes out. We see Emily when she comes to town with her 2 sons to visit. Well, Emily, Margaret's granddaughter, leads a very private life, I said. Just like I have had to. Dealing with the Ryan sisters seems to come with a high price to everyone around them. Sophia and Clara have been using people for most of their adult lives. It wasn't until Margaret gave me the material that I started to figure that out. Do you have anything to ask me about your children and what's going on with their lives before I go? Daniel asked. No, not until it's proven to my satisfaction that you are who you say you are, I said. With the history of the family, this could just another part of their game, and you were doing just what they told you to do. You might want to look into my lawyer's sudden death because if she is planning to sue me, what makes her sure she can win? Daniel's face went white. I think he realized just what kind of people he had married into for the first time in his life. We decided to trust each other enough to trade cell phone numbers. He promised to inform me if he found out anything. I stood up, walked him to the door, shook his hand as we said goodbye. Once he was gone, I cleaned up the place and locked it down. I got in the car and headed the long way home to where Emily was waiting, just to make sure I wasn't followed. It gave me the time I needed to think. My life had improved greatly since I had left the past behind. Did I want to rehash it all over again? Did Sophia and Clara have a long-term plan of revenge because of their need to get the better of me? Knowing those two as I did, I knew I had to prepare myself for what was about to be done because if they had run out of money, they would do anything out of greed to get it. As soon as I got through the door, 2 little munchkins grabbed my legs. I bent down and picked my 2 young guns up. At 2 and 3, they were the apples of my eyes just as much as their mother. I felt blessed to have all 3 of them in my life. My common-law wife, Emily, hollered, "Dinner is almost ready, so go wash up." I gladly did. Over dinner, I told her about what had transpired since I had closed the shop. Never could I have imagined how my life would be the day I left Riverton for good. When I left town nearly 8 years ago, I had promised the grand dame, Margaret, Emily's grandmother, that I would stay in touch, and I did. I made it a point to call her every other Friday. It had been 2 years to the day that she called me needing my help. Her only granddaughter was in need of getting out of a bad marriage and needed a safe place to start over. Emily, at that time, was 14 years younger than I was and had no children. I really didn't know much about her as they lived on an army base and were out of state, but I owed Margaret and was glad to be able to pay her back for all she had done for me. It had taken a week for me to find her a 2-bedroom apartment and partially furnish it for her. For the most part, finding a place in a small town is almost impossible. I got her one thanks to a friend of a friend. On the day of the night I was coming to get Emily, she quit her job, cleaned her bank accounts out, and packed her belongings. Her husband was going to be served as soon as he came home from his latest on-base military assignment, which was a 2-week intensive training session. They were going through a drill that simulated real battle conditions, thus was away from home for the duration. It was about 9 at night when I pulled into her address with the move-it truck I had just rented for the one-way trip. I had flown in quietly without anyone knowing. With a couple of her neighbors and a few of her friends, we moved what she wanted into the back of the rental truck. I was in and out of her town in less than 4 hours. When I got asked where I was from, I refused to answer, saying for now it was best that no one knows. Emily and I began to get to know each other as we drove back. It was the middle of the night when her grandmother called her. I smiled when she said, "Yes, Grandma picked me up. You could have warned me that he was a wild-looking bushman who might look half-decent if he cleaned himself up." The next day, Margaret contacted her granddaughter's lawyer to have all her legal documents and communication mailed to my Courier Express box. Emily had warned us both that her soon-to-be ex-husband would be a lot of trouble. I took a proactive stance for her protection. In time, we would both learn that my thinking about her situation had been right. Emily, once settled, took over running my convenience store. Within weeks, she proved to me it did need a proper store manager. It turned out to be the best thing I had ever done as it came easy to her. The changes she made, with my approval, made the operation that much more successful. To her, the customer needs came first. Her personality alone brought in a lot of new business. She worked with each of the staff, assigning responsibilities and codes of conduct. It had blessed us by becoming a smooth-running operation with no staff problems. Margaret had to get a restraining order against Emily's ex because of the ongoing verbal threats he kept making against her. What he did because of Emily leaving got him a dishonorable discharge, which resulted in him moving back to my old hometown because that's where he believed his former wife would be. Being new in a small town makes you the center of attention, so to keep some of the horny single men at bay, Emily kept wearing her diamond ring. It gave her protection when she needed it the most, and the time to adjust to her new life. Within weeks, she was doing all the banking and getting the books caught up. Everyone accepted her because I had brought her in. Emily was beautiful in every way, but it was her personality and honesty that I liked. It did not take her long to size one up. She had long black hair that hung straight down, which she kept pinned back off her face. She was built more for keeping one warm on a cold winter night than anything else. I thought she would be a keeper for the next man she fell in love with. When she was asked who the lucky man was, she would say, "And sure you can figure that out for yourself." That's all it took to get the rumors started. It was soon believed because of gossip that we had met online. Behind our backs, she was referred to as Joe's future mail-order bride. On Mondays, because I worked alone on that day, she started bringing me a box lunch. I'm one of those who, when I am doing something, forget to take the time to eat. As a result, I had lost a lot of weight. During this time, we started building our relationship. Within weeks, everybody thought we were a couple. If one of us was invited to something, they automatically assumed the other was coming. Neither of us was looking for a new relationship, but we kind of grew into it. Margaret kept us informed on things going on back home. We found it interesting when we learned Emily's ex was in a friends with benefits relationship with Clara. The day she got her divorce was the day that we took our relationship to the next level. We had spent the night celebrating at the only watering hole in town with a group of friends. It was while dancing a slow dance under dimmed lights that we shared our first kiss. 6 months later, we moved in together. While the kids were having their bath together and preparing for bedtime, I stuck the small bathroom wastebasket in the sink and shaved my beard and mustache off till there was nothing but stubble left. My children were mesmerized watching me. I took the bowl and brush she had bought me one Christmas and lathered up my face, then did the same to them, much to their delight. Emily came in, seeing why the kids were giggling just as I started to shave. Her blue eyes sparkled in surprise. Our 2 little boy faces were lathered up too. All 3 of them watched me as I finished what I had started. "Looks like Daddy is going to look like you with a nice clean face," Emily said teasingly. "Do you think I should cut his hair too?" Both of the brats said yes. I just laughed and said that I could get the barber to do it on Monday. "No, I'm going to do most of it myself," Emily said before I got a chance to change my mind. So after getting them dried and dressed for bed, they were sitting at the kitchen table watching their mom cut my hair. By the time she was done, I looked like a human again. There was more hair lying on the floor than what was left on the top of my head. I hardly recognized myself when I looked in the mirror. I told Emily that she had done a splendid job. Emily sent me to the shower to get all the fine hair off while she cleaned up the mess. While I was doing that, her grandmother called as my daughter Madeline had just left. Emily had gotten the impression that when it came to her grandmother's sister's family, Margaret was planning on going to war. Her grandmother believed it was time to take those down. Madeline had left her great-aunt's place with the knowledge that each of my 3 children was supposed to have received an annuity of $700 a month each in lieu of child support, which had been bought by me through Mutual Life. None of them had received any of it. Hell, it turned into being a wild night. If I had known that shaving and cutting my hair would turn her on as it did, I would have done it sooner. For the next week, I had to endure "Who are you and what did you do?" to jokes from all who knew us. Emily got asked if she had to blackmail me to get me to join the normal in society. Emily responded with her usual humor by saying, "I promised to force him to have a bath at least 3 times a week." Most caught the joke, some didn't. It was interesting to learn how things were going in Riverton. When you believe you don't stink, the bird of paradise told me I was going to be sued for abandonment, desertion, and back child support in civil court. Emily and I both found this to be a hoot. They believed that if they got the judgment, a collection service could be hired to find me. When the mail store delivered the news, he thought it was a big joke. His boss and the district attorney even had hired a lawyer to act on my behalf. Then he explained they were using my situation to give them time to put everything together. Daniel had estimated that Sophia and Clara had stolen over $55,000 from each of our children. They were looking into my former lawyer's sudden death with new eyes. Emily's ex-husband was now a person of interest because of it. In reviewing the cold case in relation to what I had suggested, the death by accident was now an open criminal case. If what they were finding out was factual, Sophia and Clara could be looking at 8 to 12 years as guests of the state prison. Sophia's ex-lawyer, now common-law husband, could be disbarred since he was the one filing the suit. The scam had to be played out for charges to be laid. The lawyer they hired for me would be paid by them. They wanted all the records I had to come out at the end of the trial because by doing such, it would give them time to build a stronger case against them. I had to look in the mirror to see if I had the word sucker branded on my face. For a couple of weeks, we had peace and quiet. Then the Grand Dame, Margaret, called us Friday night with the news. The paperwork was going to be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she had collected over the last 9 years. She had been masterfully collecting a truckload of notarized statements, personal conversations that had been videotaped about what was going on, and the names of 3 or 4 lawyers that would be great in a countersuit that she thought I should file. What stuck out like a sore thumb was the $2.3 million accidental insurance policy on me. Neither of us had known it still existed. That explained where some of the money went. Emily learned it had been bought 9 months before I had left. Emily and I spent half the night forwarding all the information, after we reviewed it, to the district attorney. Emily and I both now believe this was all being done to draw me back so I could be set up to be taken out. The next morning, Emily called all the lawyers Margaret recommended and picked one. Everything we had was sent to them by email along with a huge retainer fee. As soon as the Sophia team filed the writ, I would follow up with mine and have them served before they got it to me. It was Tuesday morning when Emily called me. Margaret was on her way out, and bringing guests with her. They had left Riverton on Monday night, stayed at a hotel overnight, and would be arriving sometime tonight. They had left in the darkness of night in case they were being watched. It told me that things at that end were beginning to come to a head. Emily and I decided that I'd best shut the shop down on Wednesday and make this a true long weekend because of family. Daniel was driving her with Madeline and their son. All Madeline knew was that they were coming to see Emily. It was almost 9 at night when we saw the Ford Explorer pull into the driveway along with an Escape. We could see 4 adults in the 2 vehicles as they approached. Emily saw the worried look on me and took my hand into hers. My truck was parked inside of the garage, so I knew no one would assume I was there. We watched them get out of the vehicles. My wife Emily asked, "Who is all with Margaret?" "That's Daniel, his wife, my eldest Madeline, who is holding their baby," I replied, "and Lily, my second oldest." "Are you ready for this?" Emily asked. "As ready as I will ever be," I replied as I picked up our oldest. Emily, after lifting our youngest into her arms, opened the front door. United as a family, we stepped out to greet our guests. I was the last thing my daughters expected to see. Lily instantly broke into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and took Lily into my arms, holding her tight. Madeline, after handing their son to her husband, came to me too. It took a few minutes for emotions to begin to normalize. Both of my daughters had turned into very nice-looking ladies. Seeing them standing there side by side was a memory that I would never forget. "It's good to see you again, Daniel," I said as I shook his hand. After the introduction was done, Emily served us all a huge dinner. It was a good thing Emily had prepared extra. A prime beef shoulder roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh homemade buns, Yorkshire pudding, and green beans. Hot apple pie fresh out of the oven for dessert put the meal over the top. It was after our kids had settled that we began a discussion about everything. "First of all, Joe, is it okay that I call you Dad?" Daniel said. I nodded my head in the affirmative. "Then Dad, the district attorney now believes that Emily's ex's car was the vehicle that was interfering with your lawyer's car when the accident occurred. We found the current owner and are in the process of having a paint comparison done by the state. If we can make the connection, he will be charged with manslaughter," Daniel explained. "The fire that destroyed his office happened that same night has always been viewed as arson by the fire inspectors. He can be seen in a video in the background watching the building burn. Since Sophia and her lawyer had the divorce record sealed, they believe that there are no records to verify what has actually transpired to date. They filed the suit against you this week. Emily looked at me as she started to tear up. I always thought you were overprotective in moving me here. Now, I see that you were not. I thought the questions you asked my grandmother seemed over the top. I realized now you needed to know what kind of man we were dealing with before deciding on a plan of action. Sophia and Clara were served with your suit on Tuesday, Margaret said. They had to realize with that action that I was in contact with you. We were afraid that they would be coming after me, so thus the rush trip here. Grandma, we have your house ready for you to move into, Emily said. It's been furnished, so all you need is your clothing. Got most of it with me in my car, Margaret said. Madeline has agreed to have the rest of it shipped to me along with all my personal things that I want to keep, like the antiques. I have given her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. It was time for me to get out of Riverton really quick. I will drive back with Daniel and Madeline and rent a move-it to bring it all out, I said. It's time we found out if our thinking is right. What thinking? Daniel asked. That the suit they filed against me is a ruse to draw me out, I said. With the $2.3 million accidental death policy they have on me, it's plain to see that the death of my former lawyer was a test to see if it could work with me. Daniel, Madeline, Lily, and Margaret's faces went white. It was as if they were seeing the light for the first time. None had seen the game plan all laid out, nor could they figure out why it was. Hearing my thoughts tied everything together. Oh my God, they were planning your death, Dad, Madeline said. Before you left town you knew it. That is why you left the way you did. I replied with a big smile. At the time, I had a good idea, but not even my lawyer believed it. It looks like he learned the hard way that I was right. Daniel excused himself from our presence to make a few important phone calls. It gave my daughters, my wife, and me time to get a bit of knowledge about each other's lives. Emily dug out pictures of how I looked when she first met me. Both had to admit that even they would not have recognized me. When Daniel came back into the room, everyone got quiet. Sophia is going to be taken into custody the day after the holiday, towards the end of the day. We can hold her for 48 hours before laying charges. She is going to be charged with 3 accounts of grand theft for stealing the annuity from her children, Daniel explained. We will slow the process down, so it will take a few days for her to get a bail hearing. Dad, if you can fly in on Wednesday and rent the move-it to drive into town, stop at a few of your old haunts to get yourself noticed. If anyone asks what you're doing, let them know you're here to pack up Margaret's stuff, Daniel explained. That way, Sophia will have to be communicated with via the city jail. The DA, when I told him your thinking on the whole situation, said you made perfect sense. Until your thoughts came out, we could not put it all together. When you arrive at Margaret's house, we will have police protection for you until it's all played out. Daniel, you are saying that the father of my children is the bait you need to draw my cousins out, Emily said. What guarantees are you willing to give me that you won't be calling me to inform me I am a widow before we're legally married? I looked at Emily. She saw the look on my face and said, Damn, you're going to do it without a second thought no matter what I think. That is one thing I had to say about my Emily. She knew me better than I knew myself. Emily, Joe has always been that way. That was why I called him to go save you from the unknown when you finally decided you had enough of your exes, Margaret said. Joe will never ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. He wants all of us to be free of the witches for good. If this is what it takes, then to him, it's worth it. Grandma, I'm only afraid that Joe is going back into the devil's den to face the unknown, Emily replied with a smile on her face. Margaret responded, if Joe was a boxer, he would be a world title holder. There's no one alive who thinks faster when he's on his feet. That's his advantage against the witches. Everything he will do will be throwing them out of their game. Emily, you need to keep in mind that Sophia and Clara have no clue that Joe knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'm going to be in Daniel's hands, I said. If anything happens to me, remember he has to answer to Madeline, who is my daughter. Daniel knew better than to say anything, so he just shook his head. He knew just how dangerous it could be for me when I went back to Riverton. Later, we got the chance to talk as the 4 women got into a deep discussion among themselves about what was going on. The DA figures that Emily's ex will make his move shortly after he hears you are in town. He is going to learn that it was you that came and got Emily out of the terrible marriage she was in. He will be enraged, Daniel said. That info will come from Sophia, who will be told that by a planted informant who will be placed in the city jail early Monday morning. The question is, if he is captured in the act, will he give it all up to save his own skin? I asked. We looked into his past with the military, Daniel said. Whenever he got caught, he admitted to it and took responsibility. He's a follower, not a leader, so I expect that he will fold quite easily. The only reason he has a relationship with Sophia and Clara is that he is easy to manipulate. The sign said, "Welcome to Riverton, a sanctuary city, population 35,000. All that did for me was verify that the city council had declared the laws of the United States of America don't apply here. Welcome to our version of the Wild West. Justice here depends on what we tell the boys in blue to do. Law-abiding citizens, we charge illegals, we look the other way. We are not prejudiced after all. This is the progressive way. The privileged working class always has to pay for the sins of others, as the powers that be had to please their masters, who wanted minimum wages kept down and cheap labor around. To give them that, a lot of things were done that required those in authority to look the other way. Not much had changed in almost 7 years. Besides seeing the main drag freshly paved, everything seemed the same. I figured if I wanted to be seen, my first stop should be an old favorite haunt of mine if it still existed. Thankfully, Bob's and Betty's Burger Bar still existed. It looked the same, except that it had been freshly painted. I pulled into the parking lot and got out of the move-it truck and headed to the main entrance. At 11:15, I was just ahead of the weekday lunch crowd that would be coming in. I was banking on the fact that since I had been a businessman in my former life, my face would be recognized. We wanted them to know fast that I was back. After taking a seat and getting a menu, I noticed a few faces looking at me. I saw a few cell phones being used. The server came over with my coffee and the cream and asked if I was ready to order. Is the Monday special of meatloaf, baked beans, and garlic mashed potatoes available? I asked. How do you know about that? The server asked. It's reserved for regulars and not advertised. Tell Henry Joe wants brown gravy and a few fried onions on the meatloaf, I said. The way the waitress looked at me as if I was crazy. I stood up and said, never mind, I will tell him myself. I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen with the server following me and belted out my lunch order. Henry turned and looked at me. You stupid, Henry said with a grin. You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Rachel, please bring Joe's coffee back in here, that way we can get caught up while he eats. At the end of the prep table, Henry was the original owner's son and had never changed the name. We had been friends for most of our lives. We chatted until the rush hour was over. He had told one of the staff to call his wife to join us. It gave us a chance to catch up on things that mattered. Joe, you need to know that after you left town, the wife ended her friendship with Sophia and Clara for good. She didn't like what they did, or what they said concerning you and the children. Henry, there's going to be a few things happening. An arrest was supposed to have taken place last night that, if a few people's thinking is right, is going to set off a few events like starting a row of dominoes, I explained. Madeline's husband Daniel is working with me. That is why I'm back early. Henry looked at me in complete seriousness and said, he is one hell of a cop and is as straight as they come. He put 2 of our former city councilors in jail last year for corruption. You will have to tell me what's going on later. Too many big ears around here. We saw Laura pulling into the lot. Damn. I thought to myself, she looks good. I sat down and waited for her to come in. I knew that when she came in, she would see me from the back and not think anything was up. Henry, what's up? Rachel said it was important, Laura said before seeing me. I stood up and turned towards her. Laura, my younger sister, lost it. Her big old mean brother had come home. I took her into my arms and held her tight as if it was just yesterday. It took her a few minutes to calm down. Henry motioned to the kitchen staff to give us a few minutes alone. Do Mom and Dad know you're back? Laura asked. No, and it's best that we keep it quiet for a few days, I replied. Are you here in part because Sophia got taken into custody last night? My sister asked. Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, I said. Once I get to where I will be staying, I will be under police protection. All I can say is that the police are looking at my former lawyer's death with new eyes. They now have reason to believe it is tied into the arson of his office. The look on both Henry's and Laura's faces said it all. With what had been happening in Riverton, it was well known that the DA who got appointed 4 years ago was trying to clean up a lot of things that had never been resolved. "You're the bait to draw something or someone out," Henry said quietly. "If the thinking is right, an arson, a murder, and a few other crimes will be resolved within the next few days," I replied. "All were done to set up this situation where I would be forced to come back to town. The arrest of Sophia and my sudden return will turn a very carefully planned conspiracy upside down." "What's behind it all?" asked Henry. $2.3 million double indemnity accidental death insurance policy," I said. "Taken out on me." My sister walked out of the restaurant with me to my rental truck. We were standing there chatting when we both noticed Clara driving in. "Where will you be staying?" my sister whispered. "The Grand Dame's place." "And going to be moving her stuff to her new home," I said. "She wanted to be out of Dodge, so to speak, with all that's about to come down." "Margaret has left town?" Laura asked. "She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons," I replied with a smile. "Emily and I have been together for over 6 years. We have 2 boys who just turned 3 and 4. My sister was in total shock. "You and Emily have." "Margaret and I have been in touch all along," I explained. "When Emily needed help getting out of her bad marriage, her grandmother called me. I went in and relocated her to where I lived. We believe her ex is the one who caused my lawyer's death and the arson on his office." "Do Clara and Sophia know you know what's going on?" Laura asked. "No, but they will begin to learn what's going down when they start making their moves," I replied, as Clara started walking towards us. "Joe, I need you to drop part of your suit against us," Clara said. "The DA is laying charges against Sophia within 48 hours. "Sorry, my lawyer says we can't because of Sophia's new divorce petition claiming desertion, abandonment, and back child support," I said. "Until the divorce court rules on her claims, everything has to remain as is." "You can't mean that." "How are we going to be able to get her bail without any assets available?" Clara said. "You have got a court order freezing everything." "Maybe your father might be willing to help by putting his house up as security," I stated. "After all, you're both his daughters." Clara turned and walked away, disappointed. "Sophia and Clara's father has had nothing to do with either one of them," Laura said. "Not since he found out about Noah's true parentage. He says they turned out to be just as evil as their mother." That put another smile on my face. With that over, I got into the Move It and drove towards Margaret's house. After stopping at a few spots to pick up packing supplies 3 hours later, I was backing the Move It into Margaret's driveway. Using the large mirror, I backed it up as tight to the garage door as I could. After climbing out, I locked it up before entering the house. I walked around it to make sure it had not been disturbed. Margaret had told me she had left the curtains open. I noticed that they were closed. Before entering the house, I texted Daniel, letting him know I had arrived and asked if he had closed the curtains. He texted back that there were cops inside the residence, and they might have. With that knowledge, I proceeded to unlock the front door and go inside. "Mr. Ryan," the officer said while handing me his cell phone, "Daniel Edwards wants to talk to you." "Hi, Daniel," I said. "It looks like those who need to know. Clara talked to me at the burger joint in the parking lot just after I finished having a long lunch. She wanted me to get the freeze lifted off of her sister's assets, and I refused." "I heard," Daniel said. "We got Sophia and Clara on tape talking about having to move their plans up. Emily's ex, Ryan, came up in their chat a lot. Sophia told Clara to let him know that you know where Emily is. That alone should motivate him to do what we need him to do. It looks like our thinking is right because it wasn't an hour later that Ryan showed up. Sophia told him where you were staying. Our informant, who got arrested today, had told her that you had come back to move Margaret," Daniel said. "When Ryan asked to where, Sophia said to where her granddaughter Emily is. A few minutes later, I could be seen opening up the garage bay doors, going into the back of the van. I could be seen moving out bundles of cardboard boxes as I unloaded all the things I needed to start packing up the house. At 6:30 in the evening, a pizza order from Pizza Hut arrived. I opened the door when the delivery driver knocked. The driver asked if I was moving. I said no, I had just come back to get the stuff to help a friend. Ryan made his move about 11 that night. Using a car tire iron, he smashed in the lock on the front door, slipping in. Seeing the only light that was on in the kitchen, he headed in that direction after taking a 9mm gun out from beneath the back of his shirt. He found me sitting there drinking a cup of coffee. "Hello, Joe," Ryan said. "Sophia and Clara send their greetings. I'm here to find out where Emily is so I can go for a visit." "Sorry, that is something I will never tell the killer of my lawyer," I replied, "or the man who torched his office. Before you kill me, because we both know you're going to, how much have they promised you out of the insurance settlement?" "What makes you think I did that?" he asked, taking the bait. "Because you come across as the type of person they could convince through manipulation," I said, "to do their dirty work for them." "So how much of the $2.3 million accidental death policy on me have they promised you?" $2.3 million? "They told me it was only for $600,000, he said. I laughed and said, "Did you know that Noah is actually the son of Clara's first husband?" His face went white. "You see, both Anthony and I were manipulated and used by both of the twins for years," I said. "My lawyer, while he was working on my divorce, sued Anthony and Clara for everything they had." Ryan's face went white. "That's why I knew Sophia's suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam," I said. "The divorce was settled and only needed her signature for it all to be done. She needed to manipulate me to come back. That's when I put it all together. You're just the latest sucker to be played by them. So ask yourself, what are their plans for you? My divorce only halted their plans for my death. You and taking my lawyer out brought their original plan for me back into play. You have the ability to put them away for years. Knowing them the way we do, what does your gut say? It's hard looking at a fool coming to the realization that as soon as what he was needed for, he would be taken out. Either way, I'm screwed," Ryan said. "Causing your lawyer to lose control of his car and go into a tree at 70 miles per hour is manslaughter. Killing you will be life," I said. "Manslaughter may get you 5 to 10, but murder is life. With me dead, they can claim you were enraged with me because of Emily, and had no knowledge of what you were going to do. They set you up to be the fall guy because most accidental death policies do not cover murder. If you were me, what would you do?" Ryan asked. "Do the time, turn state evidence, and hope that your cooperation is taken into consideration," I said. "That way, you will be getting revenge on those who were most likely planning to take you out with an overdose of drugs. After all, they have to know it was your drug usage that got you a dishonorable discharge." Ryan put the gun down on the table, saying, "Call the cops." I said. "Ryan, turn around. They are standing behind you." Madeline watched her husband talking on the phone, wondering what was up. Daniel had told her that her father was at Margaret's place. The late-night phone call to his cell had woken them both up. While he was busy talking, she had put the kettle on to make them both hot chocolate. Daniel was smiling when he got off the phone. "Your father surprised us all tonight," he said to his wife. Ryan broke in to kill him and wanted information about his former wife. He talked Ryan out of it and basically got him to confess to everything. The undercover police officers recorded the whole thing on video. Madeline stood there in surprise. "How did my dad do that?" "He told Ryan some basic facts that he had no knowledge about, like the truth of Noah's parentage," Daniel said. "I think your father convincing Ryan that the insurance policy would not pay out for death by murder was the deciding factor. Even I don't know if that is true or not, but it created the doubt needed for Ryan to accept the consequences of a lesser crime instead of life without parole. Aunt Margaret said that my dad thought fast on his feet, but I never expected this." "What does it mean for my mother and my sister?" Madeline asked. "If Ryan agrees to testify in court against them, they will both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and the attempted murder of your father at least," Daniel said. Madeline picked up her phone and dialed Emily to let her know. Between the two of them, they made plans. Margaret would look after the kids for a couple of days because Emily was headed to the airport to catch a plane. Madeline would pick her up at the airport when she got texted the time of her arrival. When she got off the call, she called her sister and explained everything. Daniel had dressed by this time and was going to the station to get a signed statement from Ryan before the night was through. After her husband had left, Madeline realized she was too excited to sleep. It was after 9 in the morning before I woke up. The first thing I did was to call Henry. I needed the front door fixed. He said he knew someone, and within half an hour, the person was there. The front door was replaced and new trim put on with a new lock. The gentleman was just finishing when my daughter Madeline drove in with Emily. Emily jumped out of the car, running towards me, her tears flowing from her face. I realized at that moment how much I had put her through these last few days. Ryan was taken into custody last night, I said. He surrendered himself to the police officers who were here protecting me. I was never in real danger. If that was so, why didn't you call me? Emily said. Why did I have to learn it from Madeline? It was almost 3 in the morning before the police cleared out last night, I responded truthfully. I decided I would call you today. I took my wife into my arms and held her tight before saying, I promise I will never put myself in danger like this again. As soon as the repairman was done, we locked up after putting her luggage inside and went over to my brother-in-law's restaurant to eat. Lily met us there, as did Laura and my parents. Henry's staff had to throw 2 tables together so we could all sit together. Emily got a proper welcome to the family from everybody. Our breakfast, when it came, was over the top. Henry was so excited about what had happened. We had it all. My parents were very excited to learn that Emily, and I had 2 sons named Carson and Hunter after both of my grandfathers. I think my parents looked at every picture that Emily had of our children and us on her cell phone. My daughters opened up and told them about their bringing Margaret out and discovering me. We were still there when Daniel came in to join us. I could tell he looked tired. Sophia and Clara are now both in custody, Daniel said. Ryan freely confessed to everything, including his original intention to kill Dad. He will be charged with arson and 1 count of manslaughter once he has testified in court against the witches. Tammy and Sophia are being charged with 3 counts of grand theft, 2 counts of conspiring to commit murder, and fraud. The DA is meeting with the divorce judge who handled Dad's case right now to see if he can get the finalization of your original divorce expedited. Daniel, are you telling me that Joe and I are going to be able to finally get married? Emily asked, trying to get her mind to register what she had just heard. The DA took the paperwork with him when he went to see the judge, Daniel explained, along with all of Dad's original divorce files. He's hoping that the judge, when he gets the full story about everything, will waive the requirement of Sophia's signature, the waiting period, and grant the divorce certificate. Emily, I said, I guess I'd better get you a proper wedding ring set today and finally make the proposal. Everybody roared at my remark. Emily had tears in her eyes. She always believed we would, but she never expected this. Before we left, Mom and Dad made Emily and I promise to come for dinner. Emily and I went back to work unpacking till about 5:30, then we headed over to my parents for a private dinner. Mom and Dad had a lot of questions. Emily explained how I had come to rescue her from the bad marriage thanks to her grandmother. She then explained how she got her first job and where it had ended up. We were still there enjoying their company when Daniel and Madeline showed up with my divorce certificate. It was nice to know I was now free. When Emily was given the chance to talk, she spent it bragging about our kids and our life together. It was Mom who said we should have the wedding before the 2 of you go back. That was when my dad caught Daniel's and my attention. After grabbing a fresh beer each, we followed the leader. We men ended up moving into Dad's den because we couldn't get a word in. It's been a madhouse today, Dad, Daniel said. When it was learned that Clara was arrested, people were calling with additional information. Half the district attorney's staff had to help us out. It appears that what we knew was only scratching the surface as to what the pair were up to. It now appears that the mayor will be going down with them too. What's going to happen to Sophia's common-law husband? I asked out of curiosity. And how deep was his involvement in all of this? He most likely will be disbarred, but he will be busy raising their kids. Nothing we have found to date links him in with the witches, Daniel said. Has anyone informed Aunt Margaret? Connie peeked her head in. Dad, Emily wears a size 6.5 ring in case you're wondering. A few minutes later, Daniel and I were driving to the mall where he had bought Madeline's set. Knowing Emily's taste, I bought a 3-ring wedding set. When we got back, we were pleased to learn they didn't know we were gone. I was on the phone talking to Margaret when Lily showed up with her boyfriend. With the house full of people, we all moved into the living room. The men had to carry a few chairs in from the kitchen. Dad had instructed Emily to sit in his chair. That let my mom know that something was up, so she was watching with her eagle eyes. The room went silent when I walked over and knelt on my knees to ask my common-law spouse to legally become my wife. I had caught her completely off guard. Of course, she said yes. The party was on. My dad proudly said I got almost 9 years of drinking with my son to catch up on, and Emily and Joe, your engagement is the best way to start. Daniel had to drive both Emily and me back to Margaret's. A lot of stress and worry had been released. Tuesday, we slipped into town center to pick up the license. Emily found out she fit into Madeline's wedding dress. Henry agreed to be my best man. Lily became Emily's maid of honor. The DA agreed to perform the actual ceremony. I had to buy a suit from Macy's. There was no way my soon-to-be wife was going to allow me to marry her in blue jeans. On Friday afternoon, in my parents' backyard, in front of the family, we said our vows to the thrill of everyone. Even the twins' father was in attendance. We had told everyone that we wanted no gifts, but my ex-father-in-law pulled an envelope out of his vest and handed it to me. Joe, this is not a wedding gift. It's your inheritance early, he said with a smile. The rest of my estate will go to your daughters. I stuck the envelope in my suit and forgot about it for the rest of the day. Everybody in attendance videoed the whole ceremony and sent it by text to Aunt Margaret. Somebody asked where we were going on our honeymoon. Emily summed it up this way: after all we have been through, once we got Grandma settled into her new home, our honeymoon will be a week in Nevada and a week in Washington, experiencing what fantasy world has to offer with our kids. Because without the family, we would not be where we are today. Just before we headed off to head for home the next day, I gave Emily the envelope. Inside was a bank draft for $110,000 with a note. It read, "Thanks for helping. Karma set things straight. It had always been my belief that the twins had killed their own mother. I will savor watching them getting rewarded in kind for their deeds. So will my granddaughters." Emily put the envelope in her purse without telling anyone else. After hugging my daughters and my parents, Emily and I climbed into the Move It. We were heading home without a second thought, finally free from everything from the past. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Do you think people can really change, or do they stay the same deep down? Let us know in the comments.